So, hi everyone, welcome to today's conversation. We have a fantastic group of undergraduate faculty who are actually doing research with undergraduate students at the moment. And so we thought this event would be great for anyone who is interested in doing research with undergraduate students or currently participating in that. But it's going to be a conversation today. So we have posed some questions and we'll pose some questions to our faculty that our faculty panel. But first, we're going to move into introductions, and then we move on to questions from you as well. So we have on the screen some tips for you, and so we're going to request, if at all possible, that you mute your microphone and unmute when speaking. It just cuts down in terms of maybe some feedback and also any noise in the background that may be occurring. We also ask you to add, if at any time you have any questions, just feel free to add those to the chat. What we'll more likely do is ask you to unmute and restate that question to our faculty members. And then also you can use that chat feature at any time to converse amongst yourselves. So if you have questions or you see someone else, you can also put your LinkedIn handle in that in the chat as well for others to connect with you. And so we are looking for a great conversation today, and I'm going to hand it over now to Chris Reeves.
All right, thank you, Risha, and thank you everybody who is attending. We have 20 plus people right now in the audience, and certainly thank you to the panel. And I'll come back to the panel that you see on the screen in just a moment, and we'll let you introduce yourselves, and then we'll kind of come back to you, the live look at yourselves. But one is just a little bit why we're here, as Risha talked about. We've certainly been challenged by the pandemic, obviously, and the tech research enterprise is not immune to that. But a lot of credit to the faculty, postdocs, research scientists, graduate students, undergraduate students that have been able to adapt in this environment and proceed with their research. I was looking at the enrollment for undergraduate research last fall, and we're only just 10% less this fall compared to last fall, some of the numbers that we look at. And just extraordinary to me, given the limitations that, we've had and had to deal with. It just shows how, great how we can adapt and continue out the research that we're doing at Georgia Tech that's so important. So as Risha said, in talking to some faculty and some students, we thought it might be worthwhile to talk about some of the lessons that we learned collectively and share some of that with each other, given the challenges that we've faced, specifically related to undergraduate students and getting involved in the research environment as we know it today. So without further delay, let's meet today's panelists, and then we can jump into some of our questions. So I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves. And then when you introduce yourself, just give a quick summary. We'll go ahead and do this. Give a quick summary of your research area. And I'm going to go left to right, starting from the slide there. So Dr. Kim, I'll start with you. Just introduce yourself and a quick summary of your research area.
Hi, hello everyone. My name is Hasun Kim. I'm a faculty in Computer Science, College of Computing. My research area is hardware optimization in the processors, and I'm looking at the various applications and high performance computing applications, or these days is ML-related applications that get quite a bit undergraduate students related to that topic.
All right. Thank you. Dr. Crawford, we'll come to you next, and Amit, you can go after him.
Oh, hello, I'm Hugh Crawford. I'm in LMC. I think I'm sort of the odd person out here because, in literature, you just do sort of solitary scholarship. And so our work is kind of minimally impacted by COVID. But my specific area is environmental humanities and 21st century environmental philosophy. But the project I'm working with the student is a side project on small press publication small press publication.
Hi, this is Amit Reddy. I'm in the School of Chemistry and Biochemistry. It's good to be here with everybody. I'm a biochemist. I'm a bioinorganic chemist. So we study the role of metals in biology. A lot of you guys might take vitamin supplements, and you'll see metals like zinc and iron and copper being required for your diets, and we try to figure out exactly how biology uses these metals to endowing life, and so that's what my lab studies in various cell types and in organisms.
Who's
Okay.
next?
You are Jeanette. Please.
Okay, I'm Jeanette Yen. I'm in the School of Biological Sciences, and I also direct a Center for Biologically Inspired Design. So my research is in oceanography, and I work on underwater communication by plankton, and mainly I'm interested in their behavior of mating, of course. I have an outreach program in urban ag, and last week I just got a new grant from the Carter Center. Turns out the guinea worm's intermediate host is the copepod, which I've worked on for over 40 years. And so I'm going to become the copepod supplier for this project that has been run by President Carter to eradicate guinea worm in the world. So my students are crazy excited.
Fantastic. Okay, our last panelist, Pascal.
You're muted.
Sorry, I was muted. So my name is Pascal Van Entenrijk. I work in ISYE. I work mostly on optimization and machine learning applied to very large-scale systems, mostly in mobility and in energy.
Okay, fantastic. So that's our panelists, and that's who we'll hear more from as we go forward. And so, as Risha said, this is a kind of open Q&A. So please make sure you put your questions in the chat, and we'll come to you. We'll either answer those, read those questions out, or come to you to ask those questions verbally yourself. So Risha and I prepared a few questions for the panelists, but obviously we're not research faculty, so I'm sure there are people out there who have other questions or questions that we might not consider or certainly important to you. So again, please put those in the chat so we can come to you, or you can just put a question mark in the chat and we'll come to you verbally if that's the case. Okay, so Risha, is there any last thing before we start with the questions?
No, that is it. We actually have a couple of questions in the chat at the moment, and so and keep them coming. So Chris,
Okay.
I believe you have the first question, and then we can move to the chat after that.
Okay, sure. So let me ask the first question to the.
Or do you want us to tell stories? You want us to tell stories, or you want us to answer your questions?
Well, the storytelling's fine too. Everybody likes a good story. So I'll let you decide if you want to tell a story or answer.
All right. All right, you can ask questions. I'll let you
Okay, so
be in control.
given the pandemic, as I mentioned, it's caused many challenges to the research at Georgia Tech. What have been some specific challenges that stand out to you that you've experienced related to undergraduate research students and getting them involved into research during the pandemic?
So I got a new undergrad, freshman, 4.0 from his high school. So I said, oh man. And, okay, he came to me in August, which is my regular time of getting my Montana copepods. So I got my Montana copepods, and we've been studying the sensory ecology of it, but I knew nothing about the feeding ecology. So I gave Griffin that project. And everything he did, no one knew about. So he knew everything he did was a discovery. So he's really excited. But the weirdest thing happened. So he did all the work. And then I suggested, why don't you give your work, because he had gotten so much done. This guy is crazy good, works really hard. He's told me that he just loves coming to the lab because it's the only place he gets to interact with anyone. And so he's coming to the lab. It's only me and my other grad student and the animals, his little plankton. So he's playing with his plankton, counting them out and saying hi to them and making them perform. And so I say, well, why don't you give a talk? And so we're submitting the abstract, and he gets appendicitis. And I have to answer all the questions for putting in the abstract, what his name is, what his background is, what his address is. I didn't know any of it. So he was very excited because he was on complete pain pills because Grady screwed up the operation and he was they totally messed him up. So he went home to Florida. But then he was really happy to get his abstract submitted. And then the day after, he was still on pain pills. He got the Pura Award. So I got to tell him, while he was, still in the hospital, still on pain meds, that he got the Pura Award. And I think that will probably help his recovery. So that was my story.
Well, probably no one else is going to have the challenge of an appendicitis.
Right.
But that is quite good. Other panelists, I don't. Maybe I'll go in order here just so we can have Pascal. Is there anything that you can mention in terms of some of the challenges?
Yeah, so I think the main challenge, there are a couple of challenges we faced, and they really impact us in some fashion, and we had to adjust to them. So the first one was, we used to have weekly physical meeting with everyone in the groups, going from postdocs to PhD students to undergraduate students. And this is typically, a good time. We review what we have done in the week. We have pizza, and then we, everybody can mingle and talk to everyone. So the undergraduates talk to the postdocs and the PhD students. So this is extremely difficult to do in an online setting. We try to do that. And it worked for a couple of weeks, but then it became very tiring. And so it's like all these, happy hours. They don't really work long term. So we had to change that. So that's one of the challenges. So what I do is that I typically bring smaller groups at my place. And, my wife and I cook dinner and we bring some of them. So that's what we do. Obviously, social distancing and so on. So that's one of the things we do. It's not as effective, but still, you have these contacts between the undergraduates, the PhD students, the postdocs. And we can talk about, anything and a little bit of science and the rest as well. The second thing that we have a lot of difficulties on is that everything, when we communicate research ideas, is much slower. And this is impacting undergraduates more than anybody else because they just try to enter the topics. So in a sense, what I found is that we're spending more time going over everything. And so we use new tools, to actually try to do that, more graphical representation and so on. And that's how we try to tackle that. But the basic for me is that we take more time. We need more organization. So my postdocs are doing a little bit more work organizing the meetings better. So everything has to be more organized in a sense. But I think the undergraduates have been very productive once you start addressing those issues. But still, I think there is a certain, we are slowed down by the pandemic for sure.
So I want to make sure we obviously get to some of the questions in the chat, but I'll just open this up to Hussein, Hugh, or any challenges you've experienced that you've thought you've been able to address them fairly effectively with the undergraduate students.
Yeah, so the main challenge, of course, for us is space. We can't accommodate all of the undergraduates in the labs while maintaining safe social distancing, and so this has created a lot of sort of derivative problems from that. So one is, typically when an undergraduate joins the lab, they have very close bonds with graduate student or postdoctoral mentors, and they learn some techniques. They get their hands wet, and then over time they then pick up really the nuts and bolts of their project and the intellectual component of that. Now, with most of our undergraduates being remote, they don't get any of the hands-on stuff, and they're really being asked to pick up on the intellectual components first, where we might ask them to research this or study that, and then give us a report on how we might proceed. But it's sort of absent all of the specific experimental context, which I think makes undergraduate research the most fun. So there's sort of that, we're sort of completely reversing how we typically approach undergraduate research by just asking them to front load the intellectual part and to think up ways to devise potential projects or analyze data. But then the other part is that we do have some space to accommodate like maybe one undergraduate. And so then there's this question of, okay, well, which one do we allow and how is it fair to others that might not be able to come into lab? And so the way that we've addressed that is really just basically based off of seniority. The undergrads that have had the most experience they're sort of given preference over when they can come in because they're a little bit, definitely more independent. And then so that's how we've been playing that, but it's definitely an odd dynamic, and you want to avoid playing favoritism and that sort of stuff. So it's really a work in progress, but those are the two biggest challenges. And of course, with virtual, with anything virtual, there's also this problem of just disconnecting with our students. So I've definitely noticed virtually just the one-on-one contact and the interest and motivation seems to be less than if they were here in person. And so these are all of the challenges and issues we've been trying to confront over the last 6 to 9 months, basically.
So what about Jason or Hugh, anything that you would like to add in terms of some challenges you've maybe faced and how you might overcome them as far as undergraduate students?
Let me start first. Yes, we share similar challenges that we used to have physical meetings. That's no longer possible. Uh, I was expanding on my topic into a little bit more robotics domain as a getting an application. I'm a more in the hardware simulation person that my traditional workload doesn't really need any physical accesses, but newer work, especially the work that I was doing with undergraduate students, were heavily like hardware oriented project that students come and lab and they all sit together and trying to operate robots or work on ML workload and applying. Some of the branches that are more effective when we have access to this hardware, we sort of actually terminated, and only the students who are already doing can continue because they can continue remotely. And then so I kind of adjust the research topics that requires some physical accesses or sort of slowed down, and then only expanding the topic that doesn't really need a hardware part. To overcome this interaction part, we have more frequent Zoom meetings and more tight match with the mentors and then like a PhD students, undergraduate. That previously was a little bit like a loose bound, and then one PhD student advised a little bit more of them. That was possible because undergraduate student itself was grouping. But now that's become a little bit challenging because the grouping among undergraduate students are extremely challenging if they haven't worked before. So that ends up being a very small unit, and then having a tight couple with the PhD students so that they can continue the project. Those are sort of the ways that we overcome the challenging part.
Yeah. Okay. Hugh, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I'm not. I'm not managing a team, right? I'm mentoring an advanced undergraduate student on Amit, I loved your term, front-loaded intellectual. Like, it's totally front-loaded intellectual. We have one other person involved. It can all be done virtually, so it doesn't present any problems whatsoever. And indeed, it actually, in part, works to our advantage because part of the project that the student's working on. So I'm afraid I can't offer any solace or suggestions.
All right. Well, thanks for that. And Risha, I know we have some stuff in the chat. I know just looking at the chat, I've already learned how to offer dinner at my house to those guests. So I've got that figured out, thankfully. And so, Risha, was there something from there we should ask?
Yes. So, Dr. Levy, can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Oh, sure. So my original question just had to do with how to balance safety with appropriate levels of laboratory training, safety training and things like that. So I've been working with a number of different student groups via VIPs, and they've been working really independently, which I think is great because they're taking a lot of ownership of their projects, much like, Jeanette, the story you were telling of your student. They are really into it. They're obsessed with it. They want to, it's one of their favorite things to do this semester because it's like the only real thing that they're doing um, in a hands-on way. But, right, like, I've got one group that's, doing a microbiology project and another group who's working with, some sort of organic chemistry reactions and I'm just really, I'm concerned about their safety and I want to, balance, laboratory safety with infectious disease safety because, I mean, I don't know if y'all been keeping an eye on campus, but rates are increasing on campus in Georgia, in the US, where it's, it's scary. So, do you have any creative ways of training students virtually or what? How are you handling that?
That's a great point, Jen, and that's something we have confront all the time. I can offer up some types of things we've done. So number one, it's really been like with just like fresh green undergraduates, like freshmen or sophomores who have never had any research experience. We really just can't have them in lab because they require a lot of hand holding. So any in-lab experience has been restricted really to like the more advanced juniors and seniors that have been around in our lab for some time. So that's one thing. The other thing that we've started to do that you might find worthwhile is people have just started recording everything that they do. They've just set up their iPhones in a way to like record the techniques they're doing, and this was really a way for us to help train first-year graduate students that wouldn't have the normal training because of the social distancing and all that. And I think it's benefited some of our undergrads as well when we can share these videos. I mean, it's still sort of a little bit out of context because there's still that key element of just personal human contact, but at least it's something. And so we've got some videos on basic techniques that our lab uses a lot that have been circulating in our network folders. But that's like one way to virtually handle the missing experimental component. But I don't think it's a straight substitute.
Any other panelists have safety things you've managed, like experimental safety?
No, I don't have anything for like large classes that Jennifer has. My kid was one freshman. He had no lab experience. And letting him come into the lab and work with living organisms was just so new for him. He was just completely taken. So, I don't know. Maybe small classes. But I guess that's what you're trying to do. Is that right, Jennifer?
Yeah, no, I mean these are small groups, but it's just, it's just a question of managing.
How do you do it? Yeah.
The in-person train. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I find that the remote teaching is so impersonal. So I was trying to do things that would make just coming to or going to class more personal. So I did a crazy thing. I said, hey, why don't you all come in your pajamas? And just so that you could tell your parents you went to school in your pajamas, because nobody's going to see you. You're just on your YouTube or you're on your Zoom or your BJ link. And so they all came in their pajamas one day. And I don't know, just making them laugh gets them to talk more between each other. So I'm more into getting the kids to interact. So like in my biodesign class, like, everybody has to start with an organism, because that's how I run it. So my first day, I run an auction. I actually sell organisms. I say, who will give me 300 biodesign dollars for the peregrine falcon? It can fly 200 miles per hour. Or who will give me money? Who will bid on the blue whale, heart as big as a Volkswagen? And then I tell all my, because I have a bunch of biomed engineers in my class, I said, yeah, why don't you figure out how the blue whale transports all that blood around its huge body and see if it can help humans and their heart problems. And so then they look at me like I'm crazy, but I think they're thinking behind that look. Don't you?
So anybody else have anything to respond to Jennifer's question about training? It doesn't appear so. So Risha, do you want to go on to do we have another question in the chat?
Yes, so Leah has a question. And so, Leah, could you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Oh yeah, hi, thank you. Hi, thank you. Well, I had written a few things in the chat, but I actually wanted to ask, and I realize this might just apply more to the sort of more humanities style researchers, but I did want to ask Hugh, as a person who's done the more kind of solitary style research where you really kind of have to have all the literature and all the theories in your head to really kind of do anything. How do you work with students who maybe kind of expect to work in more of kind of a lab context, or how do you work with students when it's that style of research? Because I've honestly had to kind of change my research in order to make it the kind of thing that students can contribute to. So I would just wonder if you had thoughts on that. Thank you.
Yes and no. I mean, I guess given the work I'm doing right now, it's just, again, with an advanced undergraduate student, it's a very narrowly defined thing. It's just a very simple, direct project that only involves, like I said, 3 of us and another colleague over in Scheller. And so I don't have students coming to me expecting to work in labs. That doesn't mean I haven't done that in the past, but back when it was okay for them to be with each other. I've sent them off to the fabrication lab to build things and stuff like that, but obviously that's not anything I can do right now. And so how to give them some kind of interactive lab experience in a humanities class. Humanities classes are actually, for most people, not easily taught, but more easily adapted to a kind of remote environment because it's just a whole lot of discussion. Again, for me in literature and philosophy, okay. Historically, I have done a whole lot of serious hands-on learning involving teams working together. But I'm just taking a break from that right now. My spring class, though, I am going to make students actually go out and make things with unfamiliar tools and document them via video, but they won't be around other people, but there'll be that sort of hands-on component, but because I get tired of just looking at words. But I'm really not answering your question, and I'm sorry.
No. I thought your comment about not being able to go to the maker spaces, that really is impacting my design class. So, I don't even know. I'm going to have them just come up with conceptual designs rather than prototypes. But there was this thing called, hey Hugh, do you ever hear of this thing called exquisite corpse? It's where one person in the team draws something, and then you give it to the next person, and they can erase or add, and you just send it around the team. So you're still independent, but you're getting the drawing, which is one realization of a design. But it's a beautiful name, Exquisite Corpse. I don't know why it's called that. Do you know why?
Well, no, it's wonderful. Initially, that was a way of writing poetry.
Yeah.
And somebody in design has adapted that. So that's what's going on. That goes back to Oscar Wilde, I think. I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, I can't remember. I looked it up, but I just love.
But I guess on a certain level, to go back to your question, I guess I've just sort of bunkered down and thought, okay, let me teach within the limits that I have here, and that includes not trying to put people together in teams, apart from virtually. And so I don't have to face the possibility of people infecting each other.
Right. No, thank you. No, I guess my question was not really so much about teaching, but more just about, more just about kind of like the research project itself, and how some research projects, if they're more kind of theoretical, really the only way to kind of make progress on the project is to already know quite a lot of literature and theories in order to really be able to do almost anything useful. And that's some of my work has been in that type of space, but then that's not the kind of thing really that a lot of undergraduates can necessarily contribute to. So that's why I've had to kind of think about designing new projects where there's more of a data collection angle or something like that so that the undergrads can get involved. But I was just wondering if you had more tips for that type of research project. But yeah, thank you. I appreciate your comments.
So, Risha, you have we've covered a few operational matters. I don't know if there was a question you wanted to ask, Risha, that was related to that, or anything else you might have seen in the chat.
I can offer one additional comment to what Leela just said.
Please.
Sorry, how do you pronounce your name? Is it Lilia?
Lilia.
Lilia, sorry.
Yeah, thanks.
So we tried doing something, or I mean, we're doing something exactly like what you sort of suggested in your comment, is basically create essentially literature/research projects for students. And again, just to reiterate, the biggest barrier is they don't know much, so oftentimes they don't even know where to begin. One thing that we've sort of evolved towards doing, as we've realized that it's not feasible for very green students, is basically breaking down the problem into simpler component parts. So rather than saying, okay, go figure out what this protein could be doing, it's sort of, okay, well, research, this small narrow component and tell me what you find about it. And then if they meet that goal, then it's like, okay, well then move on to this next step. So I think just breaking down the problem in whatever way you think is reasonable is a good approach for that. And it's something we're also banging our head around, but it seems like that's starting to work better than whatever we did 6 months ago.
Thank you so much. Fantastic. Love the feedback and comments. So we have different people on the call, right? So we have some faculty members, we have a couple of graduate students. And so the next question would be, what would be one of your top recommendations to research advisors to successfully incorporate undergraduate research during times of COVID? So you've tackled some of those before, but do you have anything that's at the top of your mind if a faculty member who's never done research during this time period for a graduate student, what would you advise them to do? One of the first one or two things.
This is advice for a graduate student?
Research advisor. So it can be faculty or it could be so anyone who's mentoring a student.
I think the biggest thing for us is just staying connected, even though students have mentors and they're working together virtually. It's really easy for the graduate student mentor, the postdoctoral mentor, myself, to kind of let that interaction fall by the wayside. We're all busy and we're like, oh, well, let's put off this meeting for next week. And then before you know it, you've missed a couple of meetings just because everybody has so much to do. And that then creates feedback problems where, negative feedback problems where the student becomes less connected and then further is removed from what they're doing. And so I think what is really difficult and what you have to really do is just keep those weekly or regular interactions no matter what, because once you miss one, it's just really easy to spiral out. I had an experience recently where I thought that a graduate student and an undergrad were talking more regularly than they were, and it turned out that they hadn't talked in a couple of weeks. And then, and the undergrad is they might be shy or they might not be vocal enough to say, hey, look, I'm not talking to this person as much as I should, and they're not going to come reach out to me. So I think it's important as the advisor to let your students, your graduate or postdoctoral students know that the one-on-one interactions are really important. It's also important for myself to remind myself that that's really important, because once you let one meeting go, it can spiral out pretty quickly. So keeping those interactions are really, really important.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I think.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Okay. So one thing that worked for me is previous I used to advise maybe 3 or like a little bit smaller size of undergraduate students, and for the last like 2 years I started advise more than 10 undergraduate students. And one thing that kind of worked well is we set up like now we settle down like 3 presentations entire semester. We set up a date that everybody present what they will do, and the mid final progress and the final progress presentation, and we treat those dates as if it's a really like class project. Presentation dates is not changeable. It's like so that we treat them as really like the fixed date, and no matter what they have to present, so then they have to kind of adjust it if the working is not going well on their speed. Then we discuss, okay, for this midterm presentation, let's try to do only this part so that you can present this, or for the final presentation, let's try to do this much so that you can present something, so that students and mentors and myself are treat those presentations very seriously, and it kind of worked really well actually, because now we like everybody has a concrete deadline for something. Because one thing I found problem is research. When the students get really busy, they get like this becomes like a lowest priority because it doesn't really have the concrete deadlines and compared to other class homework and exams. But just the too many deadlines would not fly well, but just having a presentation days. Originally, we start with one presentation day, but students ask me, let's do it twice because they make so much progress before the presentation day. So they like to have a mid progress. Luckily, so in the spring, we had that presentation right before we shut down the campus. So we had a mid-progress presentation. Some of students were able to just wrap it up because they have mid-term progress presentation and they couldn't really continue the research, but they had something. So I was really glad that we had mid-progress because previous semesters we had only final presentation days. So that kind of worked out well. And sometimes I'm like when we had in person, we invited some other faculty members or bring a pizza and also some video recording, so that even though it's only us, we kind of treat it more like a more event that everybody treats it more seriously. So they themselves are like also think as a like more important event. They kind of dress up. Some students will sort of dress up more seriously, things like that. So I personally think that was one thing that I figured out doing a few of these semesters with a large group that sort of work out really well.
Yeah, I like that idea of, motivating students knowing they're going to be expected to present and taking it seriously throughout the semester. Pascal, I think you were going to have some recommendation. It seems like you were about to say something a minute ago.
Yeah. I think I wanted to reinforce what Amit has said is the fact that I think it's important to give the opportunity to the students to talk and to be able to interact with each other, to know what everybody does in the group. It's more difficult, obviously, in a virtual setting. So one of the things we do in my group is that everybody is, well, we do the equivalent of, a speed chess, if you know what this is. And so everybody can talk a little bit for about 2 minutes, one slide, and essentially visual stuff. And they talk about what they are doing, and then we go into deeper topics if the opportunity arises on something. There is always one thing that is typically prepared, but if the visuals are telling us something that we want to deep dive, we do that. So yeah, I agree. So and then we complement that with one-to-one conversation. But there is this speed chess part, which is actually very important.
I forgot to say something about that auction, because you were just saying that you want to keep the interaction between the students open and you want to make it comfortable. Well, so the auction happens on the first day. It's my icebreaker. And every kid has to buy an organism because every kid has to have their first organism. So everybody has to say something in the first class. And I think that helped the comfort level in the class to be more easy. Do you see? Or does that not apply to you?
No, thank you so much. That's great. Thank you so much. Really helpful insights. I'm going to hand it over to Chris to ask the next question while I keep on looking at the chat if anyone is adding any. Chris?
Well, one question I can ask the group, and we've kind of skipped around on some of these questions, but has there been any particular, I'll just frame it as a surprise, any particular surprise that you have found when it comes to mentoring undergraduate students during the pandemic? Anything come to mind that kind of surprised you that you would want to share? Or is there anything that we left out or haven't asked that you think would be worthwhile to offer?
I'm just going to answer one on the chat. They
That
draw.
works too.
What?
So that works too.
I
Well,
can speak just.
it's the same thing. The chat one asks, they draw people from other classes to come in. I mean, that's the beauty of these remote things. You can actually get people from anywhere to come and talk to your class. So I got famous people to come and talk to my class. So the kids actually
Nice.
got to talk to famous people. I mean, famous in our little tiny world. But anyway, they enjoyed having people from outside. Like I had a guy from England come and speak to my class. I had a guy from Syracuse come and speak to the class. So
Yeah. I think somebody else was about to speak a second ago, and I didn't catch who it was.
You was going to say something?
Okay.
Oh yeah, I just my student that's doing the research is a big chunk of her project is interviewing poets who have written for this particular small press book run, so she's forced into interviewing them via Zoom or whatever. And it turns out, number one, people are a whole lot more comfortable with Zoom nowadays. They know how it works. And two, the audio video capture is actually pretty good. And so if we had been doing this pre-COVID, she probably would have been having telephone interviews. She probably would be trying to transcribe all this stuff. And now it's just automatic. So in many ways, that little bit of the pandemic has been a real plus.
yeah.
Just that little bit.
Oh,
For sure.
fabulous. That's fabulous, Hugh.
Anyone else? Surprising things that have
Well,
come out of it?
I think in some respects we've had even more impact with undergraduates just because we can take on more students than we otherwise would. Pre-COVID, we were just limited by how much physical lab space there was for somebody to work. Now with sort of virtual projects, you can bring in many more people, and so that's a plus. Of course, notwithstanding there are all these challenges we've just been talking about this whole time about keeping people connected and making sure people don't get lost. I mean, that's a challenge, but the silver lining is, we can actually end up working with more students than we would if we didn't have this virtual platform. So that was a sort of a pleasant surprise, I guess.
Anyone else? Just want to make sure that I haven't left any voices out of the conversation.
Similar to what Amit said, I was able to work with international undergraduate students that previously was very challenging to provide a visa support. Actually, it was intended to support visa, but then couldn't come in. But then I found that actually the experience are quite pleasant, that give most of the time, if international students come, or of course they come not only for doing the research, they also want to have a cultural experience, exchange experience. But because they're staying in their home, the research productivity-wise actually was better than they're coming here because they don't need to waste their time of adjusting U.S. life. My benefit waste, probably their viewpoint, that's their benefit. But anyway, so that was something that was sort of more easier to sort of work with the more worldwide researcher, the students or researchers in that sense, except for these time zone differences.
So maybe we have time for one further question, and I was going to ask if if you were making recommendations to undergraduate students before they came into your lab, before they, conducting research, what recommendations in this current environment would you give to an undergraduate student prior to, conducting research? Is there anything that sticks out to you now that didn't maybe pre-COVID that you're like, oh, this would be a good thing for them to do to be, ready, or they can contribute earlier on? Is there any particular things that you can think of in that area? No takers on that question. I may have went off the script on that one. Sarisha, do you have any last questions you might want to ask?
So one of the things that right now you have, again, interacting with undergraduate students, there's usually a feedback process. So how has that changed? Has that changed any at all? Or is there a little bit more creativity in that space? And do you have any advice for someone who wants to give students that feedback in this strange world that we're now living in?
I actually wasn't really aware of any sort of formal feedback process, and I don't think that I've ever gotten formal feedback. I think our only sense was, if a student came back the next semester, then we're doing an okay job. But I'm not aware of any formal feedback, and that could just be me.
I don't think there is as well, but I think my question is more based on what you did before. So before you may have, depending on the researcher, right, may have sat down with a student and say, okay, you need to pull your socks up with this in this area, or you need to do better in that area. But now in this virtual environment where it's a little bit limited, they can't just walk into your door, your office, right, and you say, okay, you did suck your work on Friday. Are you doing anything a little bit different this time around?
I get you. Yeah. It's actually been that aspect of it has been pretty challenging. Like definitely there's some students that have kind of not kept up with whatever we've discussed, and others have excelled. For the students that haven't, you're empathetic that everybody's going through a challenging time. You really don't know what people's personal lives are. There's all kinds of any mental health crises are just amplified, and so for me personally, I've felt I've been much less comfortable sort of calling people out or critiquing people's efforts. I think that just because of the time we're in, and so that's something personally that's been difficult that in the past has been easier to do, but now it's even harder. So I'd actually be curious to hear other people's advice on this.
Just keep them engaged. I mean, can I share my screen? Let's see if I can do this. Yeah, that'll be a trip. Do you see this copepod?
We do.
Yes.
Okay, so it's only 2 millimeters, and this is not the guinea worm. I don't want to use the guinea worm in my lab, so I asked Hong Lu if she could give me some of her C. elegans. So watch this copepod capture. I mean, this is really high mag and high speed. But anyway, see that worm? Well, you just do things that, that's crazy. Like you'll see this worm go into the capture device of the copepod, and then the kid just wants to come back to the lab and say, wow, what else can I do? See, now you can see the worm is here. And then, oh, well, I don't know whether you can see it like I see it. Oh, yeah, there he goes. There, now you see the worm being handled right there. So in the guinea worm transmission cycle, the copepod eats the worm, then the person drinks the water with the copepod, then the worm comes out of the copepod and burrows into the gut of the person, and then it spends a year in the person's body cavity, finds a mate, And when the female wants to release eggs, she goes to the bottom, to the extremities, and then bursts out of the skin. And apparently it's super painful. And she's a meter long, and they've got to unwind this worm out of them. Oh, anyway, I don't know why I'm telling this story, but it just keeps the kids fascinated.
Well, if they weren't behaving the way you want them to, you could certainly threaten them with that, and that
Yeah, right.
that would be well. So we only have about a few minutes left, so I want to make sure we're cognizant of everybody's time. Is there any last comment from the panel that they would like to offer?
And I
All
think
right.
Amit is still waiting for advice on how he can actually provide feedback for his students. Jennifer actually in the chat actually mentioned that she was able to do that a couple of times. Jennifer, I don't know if you feel comfortable actually saying what you did.
What are you talking about?
Providing feedback, criticizing work.
Oh, no, I was just saying that it's really
Yeah.
hard. Like people, Amit was saying, there's so many challenges that everybody's facing that he feels bad giving,
Sure.
you know, criticism to students. And I completely agree. I mean, how do you, how do you tell someone they need to step up their work when they just spent 2 weeks isolating or they've got a family member in the hospital or just they've been alone all semester walking around a crazy, weird, abandoned campus. Like I don't know. I'm just like, we got to give them grace and us grace and do yeah.
Yeah, it's time, obviously, for flexibility and leniency that everybody's been having, and it seems like everybody's been doing relatively well in that environment.
You has a response, you?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I took that quick question exactly the opposite about feedback. I thought you were asking about how do you get feedback from the students about us,
Yeah.
which is equally important. And the one thing I've found is because we're always fiddling with the structure of the class and the media forms and everything else, there is this sort of constant feedback loop. It's like, okay, this meeting didn't go particularly well. How can we adjust the technology in order to make it go better? And often that then sort of translates not just as a technology question, but an ethos question and a personality question, everything else. So in some ways, I've been finding feedback that's point number one. And then point number two, I think the sort of structure of setting up the meetings, like my student has to set up the meeting with me once a week. And so there's an invitation and there's a kind of formality about that. It's a little more structured than drop office at some point. And I found we get a lot more efficient. It's like, we pull out a little list of things. Okay, we got to do this, we got to do this, we got to do this, which sometimes doesn't happen in person because I'm, I think, more informal in my office. I don't know. That's just been my personal experience.
Yeah, that's a good point because a lot of times I guess it does happen so organically that it is informal, and in this environment it can be a little more structured when it seems like you're setting up a formal meeting with someone. All right, so we are basically right at time. We want to certainly thank the panel for all the information that you've been able to provide and for all the attendees who have come today. That's something that we certainly and Risha has recently taken on the position of interim assistant director for student innovation and undergraduate research. So she's been helping run the innovation programming for a while now. But undergraduate research is something that she's just now diving into the last month or two. And one of her charges is that she has come up with is how can we engage with faculty more? We do a lot of student-facing programming, but how can we engage and help faculty or serve faculty? So this is kind of a step in that direction. So thank you, Risha, for doing that. And so if any of you or any of your colleagues, want to engage with the UROP office or anything like that closer, we're certainly open to do that and have your suggestions for that. But Risha, is there anything last that you would like to say before we wrap up?
No, that's it. One of the things that I'll be sending out is a evaluation of the event, and so love to hear from you both from attendees and faculty, just to say what we can do. And in that box, one of those questions I'm going to ask you is how can we serve you better in the future? And so if you think about anything at all, we want to hear from you because we want to structure and keep, different events and activities and keep you in mind as well because we're here to serve you as a resource on campus. But that's it.
All right. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, all attendees, for coming today. And you guys have a great rest of your day.